host, Efi Pilarino, and today I have the pleasure to have with us Panagiotis Kriaris, who is, I would say, a veteran in banking, in the sense that I understand that he's been in a broad spectrum of areas in banking, from commercial banking, business banking, retail banking, payments, and fintechs. And today we'll be talking about payments and business models and fintech innovations. Welcome, Panagiotis.
Thank you, Efi. Thank you. Great to have the opportunity to discuss today with you.
Yeah, you're joining us from the beautiful city of Vienna, right? And maybe you can tell us also a bit about the fintech activities there, but tell us briefly about your background and where you're at today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So as you said, I have a background which is going back a few years, all the way to banking, to retail banking, commercial banking, corporates, SMEs, lots of payments, cross-border as well, money transfer. So I've been working for banks, for payment institutions. Over the past many years, I'm, let's say, more focused on the fintech and on the payment space. And as I'd like to say, I have the benefit of having been at both sides of the fence, so I can understand both sides. So I'm now working for a company called Unzer. Probably, the name is the brand name actually is a new one, so it's not very broadly known, but actually it's a company that is active on the B2B payments space, actually enabling, probably the most accurate description would be B2B2C payment space, enabling everybody who wants to offer payments, be it merchants or banks or whoever wants to offer payments to their consumers. We are sitting behind and enabling on a omni-channel setup, this from one API. So that's the idea, across end-to-end. And I'm sitting in Vienna, yeah, as you said.
And I understand that recently you were participating at the World Banking Forum in Amsterdam. And can you share with us some takeaways or insights, or, the vibe, what has stayed with you?
Yeah, actually, this was a very interesting event that I had the privilege of chairing a couple of weeks ago in Amsterdam. And we did touch upon lots of topics. The benefit of this kind of events, and especially of this one, was that we did have many senior stakeholders from across the banking, the fintech, the payment space, brought in one place for a couple of days. And we actually had the opportunity of exchanging views and discussing everything. I think the focus topics that we had been discussing were, from embedded finance and banking as a service and what's the difference, to cybersecurity, which proved to be a top of mind topic for everybody, even more than I was expecting, to be honest, to digital money, to CDBCs, to the digital euro. We were discussing a lot, having senior people from the Digital Euro Program, European Payments Council, the SEPA success, as I'd like to call it, that we've had in Europe over the past years, to customer experience, to what is the role of data. Regulation, of course, was a big topic that has become all the more, let's say, important over the past years. The crypto regulation that we are now waiting in Europe, PSD3, so lots of topics. But all in all, I would say that a very, very interesting event with lots of original exchange of views. And sometimes when you do have not so many people sitting in the same place and having workshops or discussions, that's always a benefit. And actually, I think some of the discussions that we had were recorded on a podcast. So if you go to the website of World Banking Forum from Cooper Events, and you go to the section podcasts, I think you might be able to find a couple of the discussions for those who are interested.
Yeah. Panagiotis, you mentioned about cybersecurity. We all have seen the numbers in e-commerce shoot up for all sorts of reasons, because of the e-commerce growth and because of the changes in the typology and so on. But from your understanding, is the concern because of the e-commerce growth, and of course that is linked to digital payments, but is it also because of embedded FinTech and embedded finance and all these API connectors that we don't hear a lot about that issue, but are there big cybersecurity issues and growing issues there, either because of negligence or because of scammers?
I mean, you're very right. And actually, going back to my previous comment, I was actually very surprised because we had the poll during the conference, and actually everybody was voting for the key topics. And cybersecurity was the most important topic voted from the audience, so from people participating as well. And to be honest, if I would have to guess before, this wouldn't have been my first guess. So I think this is kind of indicative of how important cybersecurity has become, and I would say top of mind topic for companies across the finance space. And discussing also with people from banks to payments players to MasterCard to fintechs, everybody seems to understand nowadays that you cannot ignore cybersecurity. Only because, I mean, you mentioned a couple of reasons, the rise of the e-commerce, the API economy, the fact that we are much more connected than we used to be in the past. And I think we were actually discussing, how can you better protect yourself? What would be how can you kind of balance the company culture? How you can balance the security aspect with the user experience, which is, there's always, as you very well know, a bit of a balance. How do you keep both at the state that makes sense for both sides? So all these topics were seem to be actually top of mind. And of course, there is a famous kind of quote that the fraudsters are always going to be one step ahead. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you do your best, you take your measures, and this is not a topic that is, let's say, I think one of the best key takeaways that I had is that this is not a topic that is concerning one person or one department within a company. That has to be a topic that is going across, is spreading across the company, so that we have a culture that is able to combat, let's say, fraud and take precaution as well. So that could be one of the key takeaways that we have been discussing.
Interesting that even cybersecurity that we would think is a very technical area, and an area where AI can have a huge impact, a return on investment, and so on. And more and more we realize that it is a human issue, cultural issue, and upskilling humans, not only that are working directly in the cybersecurity area, but in
Exactly.
the business.
Exactly.
As we digitize. I wanted to ask you about these new sort of payments that you've been talking about on LinkedIn, about push and pull payments. What is here the innovation, if you want, and what are you seeing in the market in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the topic was quite interesting because I was thinking, I caught myself one day thinking that although most of the payments transactions are initiated by consumers, by us, if you think about, let's say, the experience, the payments are pull payments, meaning that we have a seller that initiates the money transfer. So although me as a consumer, I initiate I want to buy something and I initiate, let's say, the payments trigger. The transaction is taking place from the side of the seller.
Yeah.
And this is also touching upon, let's say, the complexity of the setup that we know today. You have many stakeholders. If you talk about gateways, you card schemes, acquirers, issuers, processors, all these intermediaries that put in place what we know today as the payment setup. And this is actually a quite complex setup that goes back to, I don't know, to the 1960s or 70s when this has been put in place. On the other hand, I think I find quite interesting. So the so-called push payments, which is actually the opposite. So it's actually when you push the payments to the seller, to the merchant. And for me, it was quite interesting to understand that, for example, if you take the two giants we have today, Visa and MasterCard, they both have, they thought of something which is very simple and at the end of the day makes a lot of sense. So we do have the infrastructure, right? We do have the rails. So why don't we use the infrastructure to do exactly the opposite, to push, let's say, payments to the other end? And that's how we have, let's say, since, if I'm not mistaken, since 2016, both of these organizations, they do have these so-called similar offerings. So they have this Visa Direct, they have the MasterCard Send. And for me, what's quite interesting is that this is also something that has lots of use cases, especially when we talk nowadays about embedded finance, about the platform economy. There is much more need and much more use cases than when we might have had, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago. So that makes it very, very interesting for me as a subject.
And this is more, you see it scaled at the B2B level. Where do you see it having already, if you want, application, usage, adoption?
I mean, one of the main adoption areas that we have been seeing is, I talked about platforms, so maybe let's start from here. So we see an increasing need from platforms and marketplaces to process large amounts of payments, the so-called payouts, right? To vendors, to contractors, to you name it. And this is a very, very important use case. So, for example, if you take, I think Uber has been partnering with MasterCard. As I said before, the offering of MasterCard is called MasterCard Send. And actually, they have been facilitating payments for Uber rides, Uber Eats, you name it, Uber Pass for business. I think they have lots of offerings. And I think this instant pay feature that allows the drivers to receive, let's say, their pay to their debit cards real time has made quite a difference. So that's a use case. And in general, what I mentioned before, the platform approach. So I think there's a lot of demand for this kind of capabilities.
Yeah. Isn't that the niche, if you want, of Stripe, really? Or not so much?
No, I wouldn't say so much because, to be honest, I think these guys, let's say of course, Stripe has let's say, a focus on platforms and on marketplaces. That's a given. But I think here we do have a different, let's say, use case. So this payout capability. And of course, there might be some competition or there might be some overlapping, but at the end of the day, the idea is the following. You have to be able to bring money, to move money from one point to the other in a reverse, let's say, direction. So let's say that the contractor or the vendor or the creator takes his cut or haircut in an instant way. And that's not always a given, even if we are talking about big players like Stripe. So, and it's not by accident that we see these kind of names working together, like what I mentioned before. So that's one. Now, the second one, which is also very, very interesting, and we have been seeing lots of partnerships lately, is of course the cross-border landscape. And I think this is something that we, that there are many inefficiencies in terms of cross-border payments. We all know that they're very expensive, they're quite slow, they're not non-transparent. And I think this is also a clever way of companies like the big players like Western Union, like Paysend, offering an additional option to the customers to receive to have a payout next to the existing ones. So in this sense, I wouldn't say that this is a replacement for the existing setup, but is adding an additional option, which is very, very interesting for both sides participating in this relationship. And that's why we have seen these partnerships. I mentioned, so Western Union, we have seen a partnership with Visa, MasterCard with Paysend, and of course, lots of smaller scale partnerships with local players and with banks. I think, for example, Visa has been partnering with Tunes recently, and I think there was a mention of being able to reach 1.5 billion digital wallets across, I don't know.
Who you said, the Panagiotis,
With Tunes.
With Tunes.
Yes.
Okay.
Or for example, I think with the use cases, if you go to the banking as a service space and you see, for example, Finastra, these guys are using now Visa Direct to offer cross-border payouts again. So I think in general, the cross-border kind of, let's say, setup is quite interesting, only because you don't have so many players having the infrastructure and being in a position to offer the rails. And these guys, they said, we have the rails, why don't we do something which is, and I think you have lots of other business use cases like insurance, like in healthcare, settlements, disbursements, use cases where you have to put funds in an instant way to give to somebody a payout for whatever reason. So for me, that's a quite interesting space to watch.
Interesting, very interesting. Now, I mean, another favorite subject of, I think, everybody is digital wallets, and there's so many of them, as many as ice cream flavors, right? These days, I think the more innovations we see in payments. I was looking today into some of the issues around private stable coins, Tether and Circle and so on. And obviously, they are facilitating the adoption of wallets indirectly. It's not their main goal, but a lot of the innovations that are happening, whether they scale or not, or who wins, maybe stable coins will be eventually issued by banks, who knows? But it's, if you think of it, I mean, we're living in a world where we'll have more and more digital wallets that serve different purposes. And I don't think that it's a winner takes all situation, right? What is your sentiment, and how do you think of digital wallets?
Exactly as you said, and I was writing the other day that nowadays everybody seems, especially from the big players, everybody seems to have a digital wallet strategy. Everybody likes to say that I'm doing stuff on this one, and even the discussion around the super app game, you have digital wallets behind, because at the end of the day, the super apps that we know today, and if we go back to to the example of China with the big, very big players, they have been digital wallets for quite some time, and this is how they have been evolving and building on top functionalities on top of these digital wallets. So I mean, for me, it's quite fascinating if you go back and try to understand where this all started. So the fact that you had digital wallets, I mean, they started basically as a card on file alternative, right? That you have a consumer, so I need to avoid entering my card details again and again. And I have a digital wallet that simplifies this process. So this was the initial idea and use case behind. And now you see, for example, that with the rise of e-commerce, we had the pandemic, we have digital wallets being very, very popular across the globe. But what I wanted to say is that if you go back and you try to understand how most of the dominant digital wallets that we have today have started, you're going to see that most of them, they were tied to specific big players, to commerce sites. So for example, you take Alibaba, you take Amazon, you take Mercado, right? These guys, they were developing their own wallets because they wanted to make it easier to offer payments on their websites.
Yeah, whether it's retail or
Yes,
whatever it is,
exactly.
mobility or whatever it is, in their big world, sort of thing.
Exactly. And this is only discussing about the West, because in China, for example, we had when the big players at the beginning of the 2000s, they were developing, they wanted to do e-commerce, they wanted to sell their products. And literally back then, there was no card payments infrastructure as we know it in the West, right? So they had to develop something from scratch. And that's how these guys have actually skipped one generation of payments, and they developed what we have come to call today, these the super apps.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you do find some exceptions. So, for example, PayPal is an exception, has not been associated from the beginning with a specific e-commerce play. Although, for example, we have seen that they were acquired by eBay, right? So, but this came later. So,
Yeah.
so for me, this is quite interesting. So on the one hand side, we have the e-commerce. And on the other hand side, I think lately what we've seen is that we also see that digital wallets have been facilitating the in-store experience. And this is connected with two things. I mean, if you discuss about Asia, of course, then it comes, QR codes, they come to mind. This is how the digital wallets enable the in-store experience. And if you talk about, for example, the Western, the European experience, then it's called NFC, the NFC technology that we have on our mobile phones. So these two distinctive technologies have also enabled digital wallets becoming also an in-store kind of solution. So now what do you have? You have the combination of both. And that's why it's very, very powerful.
Interesting. Panagiotis, despite all that is going on and the variety of these wallets and the differences, I think that we are very early in the sense of having developed a smart wallet. And I'm talking more about the developed world rather than China, because there the super app model is different. We don't have it. Who knows? I mean, that's another big discussion. But I don't feel that our wallets are smart enough yet, meaning that there's so much potential for the wallet to store a digital identity. For example, if we eventually get it from the EU or I mean, in the US, partly because of the driver's license and the Apple Wallet, some already have that, but also we have storage of tickets already, right, in our wallets and invoices, right? And Apple will do that in the US. It will be late here. But in terms of getting really smart data-enabled offers in our wallet, wherever we go, because it's location-aware offers. So, I'm traveling, let's say, to London, and my phone is location-aware. So my wallet can show me what offers are around me, be it a restaurant, be it a shopping, be it whatever. We're not there yet. So that potential is not realized yet. I'm starting to see some signs of stuff that are smart, like integrating some carbon footprint metrics in a wallet. Klarna is starting to do that. But I think that we're early. What is your impression, and are you seeing anything interesting?
No, totally agree. I mean, I think what you just said is very, very correct. I think I would just make a distinction. So, for example, if we take the wallets that we have in Asia, I think they're much more advanced. So some of the things that you mentioned are already happening. But I mean, as you said before, it's a totally different discussion, because these are essentially super apps. But if we go back to the West, I think you are very, very right. So I think we are quite early. And that's why we have, we haven't seen yet how the model is going to develop, to be honest. But the true potential, as you have mentioned, is the fact of, is the idea of building additional incremental services on top that are going much beyond payments and much more, and beyond finance. And at the end of the day, this is the usability of the digital wallets and the attractivity of the model is exactly this. So you are essentially facilitating lots of things that we do in our day-to-day, and this is how it becomes an integral part of our daily lives. So I'm using it all the more in my 24 hours within the day.
It's a search, it's a discovery.
Yes.
It's a bit like an operating dashboard, so to speak. In a way, not only as you said to execute a transaction, whether it will change form, who knows? I mean, it's interesting to see and also to think who could enable it and who could gain a lot. Of course, there, and I'm thinking out loud, it could be the big players like Visa and MasterCard that have built the infrastructure to make that happen, right?
I mean, now there is a discussion, going back to your original point, there's a discussion, for example, at least in the West, who is going to be this player, who is going to make it, right? And there's lots of discussions around Twitter, around other players. And, I don't think we have to discuss names, but what if you look at who has the most chances, I would say that the one that is, you have to find somebody that is going beyond finance, because finance is a part that we do. For example, I want to do a payment, I want to have a loan or whatever, a financial product, and that's it. But if you have somebody, a player who is active in my life in a more integral way, then you stand more chances of being the offering that is going to power this, let's say, strategy behind. That's why we have seen all this discussion going around
social networks.
Yes, social networks, because they're best positioned to reap the benefits of this kind of, I would say, association with my day-to-day, right? And I think there is lots of truth in this theory.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. Twitter is what a case of a business and what is going on there. And the truth is, we know, all of us know that the technology is there, right? Be it the Lightning Network of Bitcoin or some other, Visa is actually very much developing stablecoin, also dollar-backed stablecoin technology that could be much easier to adopt on a social network. But who knows what will happen? What are your thoughts around real-time payments in all this context that we are talking about?
I mean, I think in a few years' time, we will take real-time payments for granted. So once you experience once you know the user experience of real-time payments, then going back is not an option, right? So it's a very powerful model. And I can remember the discussion that we used to have a few years ago, what would be the business case, especially for providers, for banks to provide real-time payments. But as we now see the expansion of real-time payments also in Europe, I think that there's lots of use cases for consumers, for businesses. SEPA Instant, for example, is a reality. We can discuss about interoperability, but I think real-time payments are going to be in a few years' time one of the things that we take for granted, normal, right? Yeah. And nobody will be able to imagine how things have been taking place in the past.
honestly, Panagiotis, I experience it at my personal business level. You know, within Europe, I get paid instantly, and with any international clients, it's just a very frequent nightmare of where are the funds, why the funds haven't arrived,
Exactly.
you know, what corresponding banking route was taken, why, and so on. And it's like, you know, what day and age are we in? Because as you said, cross-border payments out of the Eurozone remain a huge frictions. And I'm talking about dollar payments. I'm not talking about any other
More exotic.
Secondary currency, you know, cross-border payments in Africa with different currencies and so on. There's no doubt about it. Panagiotis, thank you so much. We had a totally interesting discussion. Before closing, what are your thoughts for this new year? What are you excited about or concerned, if you want?
I mean, I always like to see the glass half full, right? So I will say what I'm excited about. I think we are now, on the one hand side, we are living in a period of crisis. I mean, nobody was expecting that we are gonna go through a pandemic a few years ago, then a war in Europe, inflation, record inflation. So all this is a very challenging macro environment. On the other hand, if you see the advantage of the technology. I mean, there is a huge discussion going on around AI at the moment, around what is the potential. I think there's lots of opportunity, and this is why I'm very, very excited. I think we're going to be seeing things are going to be moving much faster than they have been moving in the past. I think there's lots of opportunity, and as they say, it is in times of crisis that opportunity becomes more relevant. You just have to be in a position to identify the opportunity, and of course, implementation is what makes a difference. So I'm optimistic at the end of the day that at some point, even though this year is going to be probably still difficult, I think we're going to be seeing interesting stuff going forward.
Great. So technology to the rescue, and I guess human ingenuity as to how we're going to use this technology to solve the complex and interconnected problems that we are facing. Thank you very much, Panagiotis.
Thank you again. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Effie.